when I love, I'm home. When I love, I welcome the world home and I'm welcomed home. When I'm in a love story, that love story becomes a welcome home sign and I become a welcome home sign. That's home Walmart, right? That's the love story, right? That's the way through. It's the only way through the void. So we're here in One Mountain. And we're here in this moment that we call a time between worlds and a time between stories. And the nature of a time in between is that we are in this liminal space. And it feels empty on the one hand. It's a time between worlds. The old world is breaking down. The very existence of the world is threatened for the first time in human history. Potential death of humanity is actually a viable option and even a probability if you actually check the vectors of existential risk, unless we actually step in and realize that we are conscious evolution in person, that we are the universe, a love story in person, that we can and need to become at this moment in history a new human and new humanity that can actually stand on the abyss of darkness and say, let there be light. So we're actually at that point where we actually understand that there is a threatening darkness, and I know that that many of you are aware that I've been giving Yuval Harari a little bit of a hard time the last several months, and it's going to get worse. But one of the things Yuval and I deeply agree on is, and he writes this at the end of his book Nexus in his appendix, all of a sudden, kind of the postmodern sheen drops away, and there's this kind of heroic human who emerges in a very beautiful way, and Yuval says, right, we're facing the darkness. And for him, the darkness means that consciousness, which from his perspective is a material phenomena, but it emerges out of the material and it's clearly something more. He says consciousness might only exist, or he says only exists on planet Earth. And if we don't defend it, there'll be no consciousness left in the galaxy. So although I think that perspective is deeply flawed, but he gets very beautifully the nature of this moment. And actually what we share is that we're actually in this moment in which the lights can go out. And it's very hard for people to see around the corner. When people, when I started saying something like this in 2010, 11, people thought I was completely crazy. Now just partially crazy. People are beginning to get it. When COVID, everything just all of a sudden stood still. You couldn't get on a plane. You couldn't leave your house. Like, oh, it's not too big to fail. The lights could go out. We're faced with the potential death of humanity and the potential death of our humanity, the two forms of existential risk. So in this moment, when we're faced with this existential risk, number one, when the old world order and the kind of institutions we trusted and the legacy institutions and the kind of givens of understanding that we trusted clearly are breaking down. When we actually realize that the only thing that never changes is that it always changes. So it's going to change, and it is changing dramatically. I mean, the drama and speed of change is unimaginable. Have you gotten your iPhone recently? Nita just mentioned to me on Friday that she got her iPhone, and several other people mentioned something similar. And all of a sudden, AI is on your iPhone. How'd that happen? All of a sudden, AI is right there on your computer asking you if you'd like information. And AI is no longer a Google search, it's an oracle, right? Tell me what you want to know. I will tell you. I will gather the information for you, right? And tell you the nature of what truth is. There's so much that's happening. And we're in this moment in between, and we don't know, we haven't yet articulated, there hasn't yet been articulated in culture the new possibility. What's the next step? What's the next evolutionary step? This is how evolution works. We're in this massive crisis. It has to be a moment of our crisis is a birth. We have to actually be in a moment in which crisis becomes an evolutionary driver. And it has to become an evolutionary driver for the evolution of love. So this is and Lena, my friend, I wanted this recapitulation, and we want to have this recapitulation with us so we can find our way. Does everyone get, just in the chat box, why the recapitulation matters so much? We have to locate ourselves. And we locate ourselves slightly differently every week. We have to locate where we are. So we're in this time between worlds. Now, the time in between is both empty, and at the same time, because old structures are breaking down, there's this potentiating force. There's this potential fullness that can emerge, and it's that fullness which responds to the emptiness. So it's a time between worlds, a time between stories. So in this time in between, we either fall through the cracks into the void and we get lost, or we somehow manage to find our way. We walk through the void. And to walk, what does it mean to walk through the void? That's what we want to talk about today. What is the void? What's this time between worlds? It's a moment of immense void, and yet of immense potential, of peril beyond imagination, and yet promise beyond imagination. This time in between. How do we walk through it? So David's going to give us a code. Now, this is a void code. It's a code on the void. Kirsten and I have been in this conversation for many years. How do we walk through the void? Okay, the first time I wrote on the void was in 2002. I wrote a chapter called The Path of the Void. All right, and we've been talking about the void for a couple of decades in multiple contexts. We can't avoid dance. We can't avoid dance. We can't dance around the void. When we turn away from existential risk, we pretend like it's not there. We're just going to do business as usual, right? That's a void dance. That's the denial response to existential risk. Krista was just in Holland last night at a theater presentation, which was the doomer response to existential risk. Like, there's nothing to do. We're doomed, right? And there's a whole group of people in the world who say we've got to start the grieving process. Powerful group of serious intellectuals, serious thinkers. So we've looked at the facts. They say we have to start the grieving process. There's nothing to do. That's the doomer response. So we're not taking the doomer response. We think that's wrong. We're not taking the denial response. Right? So the denial response denies the void. The doomer response falls into the void and loses access to the promise in the name of a kind of realism. No, there's a deeper real that we can find. So David, give us a code, and let's go all the way today. We're going to meet the void today. We're going to meet the void, and we want to walk through the void. All right. So here we go. David, give us a code, and let's do this together. This is a huge, huge day.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. Yeah, my friend the other day was just telling me that the world situation is so chaotic and scary that he's just going to focus on his life right here. Like, that's what he's going to focus on. I'm just like, okay, well, it is hard to face the void. So here's this week's evolutionary love code. We always meet the void. A void dance, meaning avoidance, never works. There is no way around the void. The only way is through. There are 3 ways through the void: Eros, silence, and song. And the 3 ways are one. So we always meet the void. A void dance, meaning avoidance, never works. There is no way around the void, only through. There are 3 ways through the void: Eros, silence, and song. and the three ways are one. I turn my word back to you, Dr. Mark.
Let's just hold this in silence for a second. Let's just hold it in silence for a second. So there are two moments of the void. There's a personal void and there's a collective void, and they're deeply related to each other. So let's see if we can find our way. First, I want to just look at the personal void for a second. What do I do when I encounter the personal void? And what's the feeling of the personal void? Right? It's a place where I can't find my way. I'm suffering beyond suffering. That's my experience. I'm suffering beyond suffering. My spirit feels broken. I feel like I'm out of control. I'm spiraling down. I can't find my joy. It all seems too much. It all seems so radically unfair, so radically wrong, so radically unkind. I'm exhausted beyond exhausted. I can't find my energy. I can't find my aliveness. I feel so unseen, so irrelevant, so profoundly lonely, unmet, irrelevant. And again, I want to bring in the exhaustion. I can't find my energy. I can't find, the void is anti-erotic. Eros, our interior science Eros equation, Eros equals the experience of radical aliveness, reaching for ever deeper contact and ever greater wholeness. That's the experience of Eros. The void is anti-erotic. It doesn't matter. The void is the matrix of depression. And the matrix of depression, the ideology, not ideology, the ideology, right? The ideology, the internal animating structure of depression is futility. Futility, I can't impact, and it doesn't matter. Futility, I have no power to change or to impact, and then it's futile. The whole thing doesn't matter. That's the void. And the personal and collective void are related to each other. So we often cite Camus, right, in his book, The Stranger, which begins, "Mother died today, or was it yesterday?" And mother is Eros, right? Mother is the experience of presence. Mother is the experience that it matters. Mother's the experience of being held. Mother's the experience of being welcome in cosmos. In the experience of the void, there's no mother. Mother died today, or was it yesterday? But at some point, mother died, and I no longer felt welcome in cosmos. See, when Camus talks about, Meursault, and I may be pronouncing the French wrong, I often do, but Mersault, right? When Meursault says mother died today, or was it yesterday? And Camus puts those words into his mouth, and the name of the book is The Stranger. What Camus is saying is, he's saying, if I can cite Steiner, he's saying, strangers are we, errants, ERRANTS, strangers are we, errants at the gates of our own psyche. In other words, Meursault is speaking personally. My mother died today, or was it yesterday? And he's speaking as the collective culture. Mother died today or yesterday, but at some point, mother died. At some point, we entered the void. At some point, we couldn't find our way through. And the personal void and the collective void are deeply related to each other. What triggers the experience of the void? The void is experienced personally by betrayal. When I'm betrayed by the mother, when I feel betrayed by the mother is supposed to hold me. The mother is supposed to love me. The mother is supposed to protect me. And sometimes the mother is a biological mother, and sometimes the mother is a brother, and sometimes the mother is a husband, and sometimes the mother is myself, right? A son or a daughter. Many people play the role of the mother. But the mother's the place where I'm welcome, where I can rest, where I'm held. The mother's the realization that every place I fall into her hands. So when the mother dies in my life, right, when I feel betrayed by the mother, and so the experience of betrayal triggers futility. It could be I've been in a community my entire life, and then something happens in the community, and somehow I'm thrown out of the community that I poured into and I built, and my blood and my sweat and my tears, the signature of my deepest soul essence, the signature of my deepest yearning, the signature of all of my holy and broken hallelujahs is inscribed in the teachings of the blood that are supposed to be the core of this community. And then all of a sudden, I find myself on the outside. And that experience of betrayal, even though it looks like I've dealt with it, and it looks like I've worked with it, and it looks like I've got it together, but I don't. It's like it throws me into the void. I'm catapulted right into different realities, and I can't find my way home. I had an image, I had an experience. Wow, this is what it's going to mean to have a son. Right? I'm going to pour my energy. I'm going to educate the world. I'm going to give a transmission to the next generation, and my son or my daughter, they're going to carry on. And then my son doesn't understand me. My daughter doesn't understand me. And sometimes they might betray me overtly, or they might take very good care of me, but actually leaving me profoundly lonely and unseen by those that I'm desperate to be seen by. When trust is broken early on, that's what we call early childhood trauma. Early childhood trauma is the recognition of the betrayal by those that we trust most, to hold us in our aliveness and to hold us in our goodness and hold us in the purity of our Eros. And yet we're not held. And yet we don't experience reality being attuned to us. And we put our best self forward, our most vital energy, and it's rejected, denied, mocked, ridiculed. And this experience is repeated again and again and again through life. We're bullied. It's unfair. Where are the school authorities? Why did I get bullied? Right? We're betrayed. And we're all betrayed. There's no one who is not potentially Christ, and there is no one who doesn't meet Judas. And there is no one who at some moment in their life was not Judas. We got to get over being Judas, and we got to start being Christ. But we can only do that by actually realizing that the beginning of our religio, of our religaring, and of our finding our way home, of our reconnecting, right, into the gorgeousness of our lives, is to realize that we begin the act of religio, of finding our way home, in response to betrayal. It always begins with betrayal. The Garden of Eden is a story of betrayal. Just not clear who betrayed who. Did Adam betray Eve by not standing with her and turning her into God? Right? Did Eve betray Adam by giving him the snake, by giving him the apple, which was against the command? Did God betray Adam and Eve by putting them in a no-win garden with a snake? And who's betraying who? Was the snake betrayed because man refused to talk to him, and only Eve was willing to begin a conversation? But the story of the Garden of Eden, however we tell that story, and we'll spend a week or two in the Garden of Eden because it's an unbelievably important story. It's a story of betrayal. In other words, this great journey of the Solomon lineage, which begins in this kind of biblical, great historical epic, this great mythology, but mythology in the sense of being more than history, not less than history, begins with the story of a betrayal, the story of a fall, the story of a murder, the story of a fratricide, right? Was it sapiens killing Neanderthals, right? One brother killing another brother. And it begins in the void. Everything emerges from the encounter with the void. I'm either lost in the void or I find my way through. But it's all about the void. I either engage in a void dance. I dance around the void by denying it. I dance around the void to the doomer response. The doomer response is really also a way to avoid the void. Right? To engage the void means that I'm going to step in the middle of the night, as Jacob does when he encounters the stranger and he wrestles with the stranger. And he's in the middle of the night. He's by himself. He's about to meet his brother Jacob in chapter 32 of the book of Genesis. And he sends all of the family right away. And he says, I need to be by myself in this night in the depth of the void before I meet my brother in the morning. And in the depth of that night, a stranger comes, and we don't know the stranger's name. And the stranger wrestles with him and wounds his inner thigh. He limps the rest of his life. He's profoundly wounded. And yet out of that wounding, out of the depth of that night, Jacob, and the word Jacob, Yaakov, means the crooked one, becomes Israel, Yashar, the one who's straight, who's throbbing and powerful. He doesn't leave his crookedness behind. He's called Jacob again later. We always include it and transcend our crookedness, right? Our holy and our broken hallelujah, it only gets holy when it includes the broken. When Moses breaks the tablets in the book of Exodus, and then he goes up again in the great myth on the mountain and receives a second pair of tablets. Right? The sacred lineage says that luchot v'shivrei luchot munachim ba'aron, the tablets and the broken tablets, are both in the ark. And I'm adducing today more than usual kind of sacred texts from the Genesis and the Exodus lineages and the Solomon wisdom tradition, because they point us in a particular direction. It's, what does it mean to move through the void? There's always a void. I'm always going to be broken. I'm always going to be betrayed. Mother's always going to die. And mother's always going to die personally. And at this moment in history, there's going to be a moment where mother dies collectively, meaning the old truths will be challenged. That's the void. Many, many times, we've talked about this, and I want to bring it to the table, because you can't understand postmodernity if you don't understand, right, that postmodernity is experiencing the void in the deepest way. And again, the void is real. Before we fill the void up, before we find our way through the void, we need to take the void seriously. When mother dies, I am crushed. You can't cheat grief. You can't cheat the tears. You can't shortchange the broken hallelujah. Hallelujah is Hallel, pristine praise. Yah, the breath of the divine, the perfect world. And then hallelujah is also in the same original Hebrew holelut, drunken intoxication, because I've fallen into the void and I can't find my way through. You can't avoid the fullness of hallelujah. I've got to be willing to embrace the void, right? To be in the void. That's the first step. There's no a void dance. You can't dance around the void. Right? Mother died. And I need to be willing to experience the full pain of betrayal. And remember, you can only be betrayed by those people or those institutions or those knowings that you thought could never betray you. And then you're betrayed. You're all betrayed, my friends. We're all betrayed. Not because the world is a dark and horrific place. Right? The world is filled with darkness and light. The world is filled with tremendum and with terror. The world is filled with unimaginable dignity and divinity and with devastation. The world is filled with beauty. And the world is sometimes filled with the degraded beast, right? The demon that's gotten cut off from the daemon, right? The angel that becomes demon, that falls from heaven, right? The Lucifer that lives within, which is always, I'm cut off from heaven. I'm cut off from my roots, right? I'm in the void. And in the void, I go demonic, right? I go Luciferian. Devils are real. But devils are not people with pitchforks. Devils are what Scott Peck calls in his best 60 pages, the people of the lie. And the people of the lie are the dimensions of us that lose their ability to feel. We can't feel anymore. We shut down. The void is too painful. We can't access our aliveness. Moreover, we actually begin to think and feel that there is no aliveness, that there is no Eros, that there's nothing to access, that there's only matter, that there's not what matters, that it is a tale told by an idiot, full of sounds and furies signifying nothing, and that tomorrow and tomorrow are going nowhere because there's no place to go. So I've got to be in that void. And in some sense, the depth realization of the Solomon lineage was the realization that you have to take the void seriously. The world is, says the lineage of the erotic mystics, whose mystery schools animated the Renaissance, the teachers of Pico della Mirandola and of Ficinio, were the erotic mystics of the Solomon lineage. And they talk so deeply about this realization that late atar panui mine, there's no place devoid of presence. No place devoid of presence. There's no void. It's all filled with sacred conversation. The hills are alive. All of matter is filled with what matters. She's everywhere. Look behind you and she's there, and look inside you and she's there, and look in front of you and she's there, and look on your side and she's there. She's always there. And yet, they tell the following story. The world is filled with absolute no-thingness. The world is suffused. The world is full, absolute, radical divinity. Absolute, radical, infinite value. Absolute, radical aliveness. And then, in order to allow for the possibility of transformation, for the possibility of gifting, for the possibility of a new emergent goodness, for the possibility of the possible human, infinity resting in itself felt this desire to give this gift, and only in giving this gift it could actually feel full intimacy. The infinite desired to gift, and the infinite desired to be intimate, and the infinite desired to be more, and the infinite desire to somehow grow. But how can the infinite grow? And yet there are no complete mathematical sets, and that is what Gödel meant, actually, and it's what Tarski, right, elaborated on correctly, right? And it's what those who tried to talk about complete mathematical sets couldn't quite understand and killed themselves, quite literally, in history, right? That it's like there are no complete mathematical sets. It's evolving. There's more to come. There's more possibility to come. But the only way I can have more possibility to come is, right? And this is the lineage's deep, erotic realization. In order for there to be more to come, I've got to step back, empty myself out, if I'm the infinite divine, to make room for you. Just like a parent has to step back and make room and make space for the child, even if the child chooses against the parent. And the educator, the teacher, it has to be an artist who steps back and lets the canvas breathe and lets the canvas speak and lets the art emerge and doesn't just impose her will or his will on the canvas. There's something that wants to emerge, and I've got to step back, and that's called tzimtzum, divine contraction, withdrawal, kenosis. Divinity empties itself out, and there's a void. And in that void, the circle shaft of divinity penetrates. The shaft penetrates the circle rides the shaft, and there's this line and circle that come together and explodes into reality, in which again, Letatar Panui Mine, there's no place devoid of she. But what happened to the void? Did the void disappear? Was the void absolutely filled up? Or is there still a dimension of reality that we encounter, which is the void? Meaning there's not an ultimate ontology, but there's a feigned, an appearance, an experience of the ontology of the void, right? Where I just can't find myself, where I just don't know how to get through, where I'm overwhelmed, I'm shut down, I can't find my voice, I can't find my energy, I can't find my goodness, I can't find my sweetness, I can't find my decency. And I want to find it desperately, I can't find it. So is that just that I'm pathological? And if we would just but medicate that properly, pharmacologically, right, we can pharmacologize the void. So we pathologize the void and then we pharmacologize it. But no, and that is what Krishnamurti meant when he said, don't feel so good about being so sane, so normal, so healthy in a sick society. There is not such a great achievement to be sane in an insane society. It means I actually don't feel the insanity. I don't feel the void. There's a moment where I've got to feel the void. And collectively, that's the moment of postmodernity. Postmodernity has this experience that mother died. Mother died. Was it today or was it yesterday? But mother died. Right? Mother died. And where is she? Where is she? The flask in one of the images of Luria, the flask, Luria, Luria, the great erotic mystic of the 16th century who walks where Jesus walked above the Sea of Galilee and Safed. All right, Luria says you have a flask of wine and it was filled with wine and the wine is now empty. And in that emptiness is the void. And so postmodernity has this experience that there were these great cathedrals of value. Right? Notre Dame reopens in Europe, and everyone's excited that Notre Dame reopens. No one goes to any of these cathedrals in Europe, right? Does everyone know that? No one goes to any of the cathedrals in Europe. Why is everybody so excited a week and a half ago that Notre Dame opened in France? Why are people excited about royalty in Great Britain, which has become a caricature of itself? Because royalty is the experience we were chosen by the divine. Even though we don't believe the royal story, we have the sense that there might be royalty. And even though the castles of Europe are empty, whoever's visited the great cathedrals of Europe, they're empty. They're tourist attractions. There's no prayer in them, even if there's a couple of priests who are still doing prayer. Notre Dame is long corrupted and empty, and yet we yearn for Notre Dame. And so all the dignitaries of the world flock to Paris to see, oh, wait, Notre Dame is here. Notre Dame has been rebuilt because we're reaching for Notre Dame in the void. Right? But we have to first recognize the void. Postmodernity is the experience of the void. And that's how I tried to write about it in 2002. To actually say that we have to take the void seriously. There's a path of the void. And one of the great masters, Nachman of Breslov, writes an essay on the path of the void. You can't find your way around. You got to walk through. You have to walk through. How do you walk through the void? How do we walk through the void? Right? What's the way through? What's the way through? There's an incredible passage in the 3rd century. In the 3rd century. And it tells the story of a bracket. And this passage is adduced by Nachman of Breslov, the Hasidic master, student of Israel, son of Eliezer and Sarah, master of the good name, who's the founder of the erotic, mystical Hasidic movement that sweeps Europe in the latter half of the 18th century. And kind of one of Kafka's favorite writers is Nachman of Breslov. And so these and there's erotic mystics in Sufism and in Christianity and in Vajrayana and in Shingon Buddhism, right? And in right. So there's schools of erotic mystics and they're always about erotic mystics are always about take the void seriously. That's one of their principles. They won't find their way around the void. Paradoxically, they're erotic mystics because they say we're so committed to walking through the void. And they know we can only walk through in one way. And so they each talk about how do you find your way through the void. But what demarcates them is they take the void seriously. So Nachman is one of these erotic mystics. And Nachman tells this story of Moses. And Moses, who's this kind of Solomon lineage mystic figure in the book of Exodus, who's the one who communicates with the infinite and receives what's called the halakha, the way, the law that's animated by love. So Moses, right, is on this very deep journey. And in his journey, he kind of in the mystical story, right, he transcends the boundaries of time. And he finds his way into the 1st century, right? A couple of decades after Jesus has died. And he sees this great figure, Akiva, who's this mad lover. Akiva is the great master of his time. Akiva is the one who says that all the books are holy, but the Song of Solomon, the Song of Songs, which is the story of outrageous love notes between a lover and the beloved. The Song of Solomon, the great erotic love story of all literature. Akiva says that's sanctum sanctorum. That's the Holy of Holies. That's the most sacred text. And of course, the Holy of Holies is the name of the inner sanctum of the Jerusalem temple, where 2 cherubs are erotically entwined with each other. So Solomon says there was a Holy of Holies in the temple. Solomon says there's a Holy of Holies in the temple, and he places in the Holy of Holies these erotically intertwisted cherubs above the Ark of the Covenant. And then Akiva says the temple's been destroyed. We need a new temple. And his new temple is the bed of Eros, the bed of the lovers, the bed of sexual communion of whatever form. And sexual communion is not about just moving the energy up and down or yogic practices, as important as they are. Sexual communion is the actual direct experience in the body that you're actually living in the field of outrageous love. And the field of outrageous love is the prior condition. Outrageous love is the love before creation. It's not the love that's responsive to a particular event. It's the love which is the heart of existence itself. It's the love of the prior condition. It's outrageous love. It's the love that everything, it's the eros value that all of reality arises within. Right? So in that experience, right, of erotic communion, I actually am outrageous love. Right? I am the prior condition. Right? I am the cosmo-erotic universe in person. And that's actually a summa bonum experience, the ultimate experience of this new story of value that we're telling and sharing together here in One Mountain, Many Paths, what we call cosmoerotic humanism, the new story of value that can take us through the void. At the core of this new story of value is that we call it cosmoerotic humanism, is that the human being becomes the cosmoerotic universe in person. And one of the ways to do that is through sexual communion, is through the cherubs above the ark. And another way to do that is through the creative act of art. And the other way to do that is through the wild ecstasy of parenting. And another way to do that is through the depth of radical, outrageous love friendship, right? But I become it. I become outrageous love in person. That's what I become. So stay close. It's deep, it's crazy, it's wild. Okay? So we're gonna bring it together. So Moses traverses through time on his kind of mystical journey, and he sees Akiva, who's the greatest sage that ever lives. Akiva, who says that all the books are holy, but the Song of Songs, the outrageous love notes, is Holy of Holies. And he says that this Holy of Holies of these outrageous love notes replaces the Holy of Holies in the temple, because the temple's been destroyed. And so Moses says to the divine in this kind of mythical story, Moses says to the divine, Moses says, if you have a human being like this, who's so stunning and so gorgeous, right, and so realized that he's the ultimate erotic mystic, Moses says to God, why would you give the Torah? Why would you give the way? Why would you give the great revelation through me? I'm nothing, right? I'm nothing. And God says, quiet. Right? It's yours to receive the Torah on Sinai in the original story of the lineage. And it's Akiva, right, to live his life. And then Moses says, well, what happens to him? And then you see this terrible scene he sees in his mystical journey, on his medicine journey. Moses sees the scene in which Akiva, who is he's the chalice of love. He's the incarnation of Eros. He was betrayed. He was betrayed and his whole world is falling apart. And he's being tortured by the Romans. And his students ask him, Akiva, didn't you teach us V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, love God madly? And they say to him, can you love God madly in this? He says, yes. He says, yes, this is my ultimate moment to be a mad lover. And he cries out, Adonai Echad. Adonai, the divinity of all cosmos, Echad is one. One, the word one is 13, right? There's 3 letters and each letter has a numerical value. So 1 is 13. And the word Ahava, 4 letters. Each letter has a numerical value, is also 13. So 1 and 13, they have the same numerical value. 1 and love are the same. When I explode in artistic ecstasy and I merge, Vayula Vasar Echad, we become one flesh. It's the movement of intimate communion where we don't disappear into fusion, but we disappear into this larger union of the one. And you shall be one flesh. Erotic, intimate communion. So this is what Moses sees, as Akiva is taking his last breath, he cries out, it's one. I'm madly in love. I'm madly in love. And then the text says, Yatsa nishmato be'echad. And as he said, one love, one love, he breathed his last. And Moses is devastated. And Moses says, Zu Torah v'zu schara. This is wisdom and this is its reward. Moses says, this is the void. There's no truth here. This is the void. It's all just a story. It's all just a fiction. It's all just made up. And the divine voice says, Shtok, be silent. Kach ala b'machshava. so it was decreed before me. So in the simple reading, it would be this kind of religious demand for faith. That's not how the erotic mystics read it. They read it as the infinite intimate, God, who we call the infinite intimate, turning to Moses and saying, Shok, enter into the mad love that you experience in the depth of silence. And when you do that, kach Allah, through that Allah, you shall rise up. The machshava means mind, and you will become one with the mind heart of God. So there's a way through the void. And the way through the void is in the silence of presence, which is the song of the love story. You're sitting with someone you love madly. Could be a child, it could be yourself in the best moment, could be a friend, it could be a partner, it could be someone you're creating with. And you've been deep inside. Then at some moment, the words fall away. And you're sitting together in the silence. And words are unnecessary. You don't need them anymore. Now, this is the story that happened to me, and it was one of the most important moments in my life. And I've shared it with some of you before. It was one of the most important moments in my life. I was in Jerusalem, and I'm walking, and it's late at night, and I'm near the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. And I'm carrying a bunch of books because I've just finished a talk, and I'm looking down, and it's the dark side streets of a neighborhood called Yamin Moshe, name of this artistic colony right outside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. And I feel this energy just blows me backwards. And I look up and I see this couple were erotically engaged. And they didn't see me. I saw them. I should have looked away, but I didn't. But I kind of went into the corner. And he must have been like 179 years old. He was like the oldest person I've ever seen. And I mean, she couldn't have been a day less than 176. And then they walked so slow, they were walking backwards. Right? But they had this, and there was no words exchanged between them. They're just walking. Right? And it was like I had met the king and queen. And then she trips a little bit, right? She trips a little bit, and I look down. They don't see me. He looks down, she looks down, and they see that her shoelace, right, is untied. And he slowly bends down. It was the archetype of arthritis at his hands, right? And it takes him 3-4 full minutes and she's standing. Regal, the queen. And he finishes tying her shoe. And had I stepped out of the shadows to tie the shoe, they probably would have killed me with just a glance. I didn't have that right. And right, he gets up and there's this moment in which they're face to face and they exchange a glance. No words. Silence of presence. And all of the infinite love in the world was there. And all of the void. And all of the brokenness. And all of the broken vessels. And all of the broken hearts. And all of the betrayals. And all of the betrayals of the mother. And all of the fear. And all of the shattering. It was all in that look, and they stayed in. And they found each other again and again and again. And every holy and broken hallelujah led to the next level of depth. And they stayed in. They stayed. They stayed. And they stepped into this post-tragic truth that it all matters. That you don't have to search for meaning because it's all meaningful. That's never not. That there's no place. You don't have to search for love. Love's not hard to find. Love is impossible to avoid. That actually reality is shimmering and alive. And that even my brokenness is a portal to the promise, because I wouldn't be broken if it wasn't whole. And my heart wouldn't close if it didn't yearn to open. And I wouldn't be exhausted if I didn't know the sweet nectar of the energy and eros of contact and aliveness. Right? It's all ever, always already true. It's ever, always already true. It's ever, always already on the inside of the inside. Eternity breathes eros. Eternity breathes meaning. Eternity breathes goodness in every moment. But I can't find my way through a conceptual structure, although there's place for conceptual structures. I can't find my way through only through distinctions, although we need distinctions. And I can't find my way through identifying the plot lines of reality out there. I need to go so deep inside and to actually have direct access to taste the goodness and the joy and the insane, crazy pleasure of just being here together right now. And in that look that they exchanged, that couple that were older than old, right, on that back road, that back alley of Jerusalem near midnight, outside the walls, the lit up walls of the old city of Jerusalem that survived for thousands of years, that itself is part of the holy and broken hallelujah. She's always right there. It's always right there. It's always, there's no place to go. The jug breaks, the water trickles, and I'm awake. In every breaking, there's a breaking open. There is no void unless there's a dance. A void, I step into the void and I dance. And I dance. That's the point. That's what dance means. Dance means, the word dance in Hebrew is mechol. Mechol means the empty space, the void. So a mechila, the mechilot hakotel, the tunnels, the empty space, or a wind instrument, which is empty on the inside, is called a chalil. So the void space is the empty space. So the word mechila means void, means void. And the way I move through the void is the same word mechila means machol, dance. I dance through the void. I sit in the silence of presence through the void. I become the artist of dance. I become the artist of silence. I become the artist of song. Why is the world filled with love songs? But you remember that? I thought the world had enough of a silly love song. I won't quit my day job. Don't worry. Remember that? Remember that? I remember when that came on the radio. I thought the world had enough of a silly love song. I looked around me and I see it isn't so. What's wrong with that? Right? Crazy songs, crazy, silly love songs, off tune, on tune, all over the world, China, right? And South America and Argentina and Brazil and Africa and all through the States, right? And Mexico and Canada and all through, right? And all through Russia. It's all love songs, right? And it's all about mother. I remember the first I'm sharing I ever did it with my friend Lena was my one Russian song that I know. How does it go? Pust всегда bude sunset, pust всегда bude niebo, pust всегда bude mama, pust всегда bude я. Something like, may there always be sunset, may there always be blue skies, may there always be mama, may there always be you. I probably got it wrong, so Lena will correct it. But it's always mama. It's always blue skies. It's always sunset. It's always you. It's always like right here. It's always right here. I walk through the void, not through conceptual structures. We need distinctions. I walk through the void by walking through the void and just looking in the eyes of my daughter, in the eyes of my beloved, whoever my beloved is. Or I look in the mirror And I'm on a plane and I look in the mirror, and the plane mirrors are great because they're not the ordinary mirrors of your house where you can't see anything. You look in a plane mirror, you're surprised, there you are. And you look in the eyes of you, and she's always there. So how do I walk through the void? I walk through the void through song. I walk through the void through the silence of presence, which is the depth of love, mad love. I walk through the void through mad love. And I walk through the void through dance. I dance through the void. I walk through the void through art. And they're all part of the same realization. And the realization is it's a love story. It's a love story. And there's agony and there's ecstasy. But the second I actually access again that it's all a love story and it's a mystery. And postmodernity was right. It said, for it to be a love story, you've got to be willing to be in the mystery. That's what postmodernity was reaching for. It's what it was right about. It said, we got to throw out the old plot lines. We got to throw out the old dogmas. We got to throw out the old lies that lived in the story, the canards, the fictions. But underneath all the fictions, underneath all the dogmas, right, is the Dharma. And the Dharma is simple. It's a love story. And how do I know it? Because it lives and breathes in me. And when I love, I'm home. When I love, I welcome the world home and I'm welcomed home. When I'm in a love story, that love story becomes a welcome home sign and I become a welcome home sign. That's Homo Amor, right? That's the love story, right? That's the way through. It's the only way through the void. And the void's not an accident. The void's not a bug in cosmos. I have no fucking idea why. And anyone who tells you they can tell you why there's a void, they're lying. So don't listen to a word they say. Right? We need to be heretics when it comes to that kind of faith. We need holy heresy, where we deny and reject the faith that's small. That's what postmodernity did. Right? The void is real. And it's not. And it's not. And it's more than one dimension. And we find our way through. In the end, it's all a love story. And then we fall back in the void. And then we get up and we realize it's all a love story. If we dance around the void, we become fundamentalists. We get lost in dogmatic certainties, whether they're the dogmatic certainties of fundamentalism, if we try and dance around the void, or if we stay only in the void, we get lost in the dogmatic claims of certainty of scientism, not science, but scientism, right? The dogmatic denial, which says there's only void. No, neither of those are true. It's a love story, and the love story is filled with mystery. It's filled with agony and ecstasy, but I know it's a love story. I breathe it. I live it. It sings me. It dances me. Cha.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Marc Gafni. Wow, 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 wow. Let's just kind of feel that and breathe it into our hearts. I don't know how all of you are doing, but I feel like the trembling and also the goodness of opening our hearts ever deeper through the void, in the void, and holding hands as we're walking through the void together. And it feels like actually that's what we've been literally doing today. We're not just talking about it, we're actually doing it in our personal lives, but also as erotic mystics for the collective, for the sake of the whole, as we always say here. So much appreciating everyone's attention here. It matters so much that we care about this space that we have, that we show up for it, that we hold space for whatever wants to come down and be born in these unique moments together. So much appreciating you. And again, just want to point out this amazing, amazing, amazing book, First Principles and First Values. We also call it the tip of the spear. It's the tip of the spear of the great library that we're publishing at the Center for World Philosophy and Religion. So many more of these are in the works and actually already going to be published in the next months, like the Wholemate, the Future of Relationship book that is coming up, and a lot more. But this is the one that is out now, and you can help by buying a book. But if you can buy a couple of books, like Christina shared my story from yesterday, share the book with anyone you meet, but also in impactful places, people that are in leadership positions. Just pass them the book and ask them to read it. And then what we can all do is actually go on Amazon and write a review for the book. The more voices we can get on that page, the better it is for the book to get out into the world. Not just the book, but actually this new story of cosmo-erotic humanism. So thank you for doing that. And then next to that, I want to ask everyone here, please do become a member of One Mountain Many Paths. If you haven't done that yet, it's so important to resource our home, to resource our revolution. As we always say here, we are doing this together as a unique self symphony. It is a bottom-up revolution. So we need to not only consume this beautiful Dharma that is shared here every week, but we actually are encouraged and invited to activate it in our bodies, feel it in our cells, and go out into the world and enact it. And one of the ways of doing that is by showing up here every week. But the second way of doing that is by becoming a member, pouring in our resources. So you can do that by going to onemountainmanypaths.org, and there you can read more about membership. And the awesome thing about it is that actually as a community, we're getting closer and closer and closer, and we're actually beginning to resonate with each other, feel each other, create this evolutionary intimacy together where we're actually holding hands in each other's lives as we're walking both through the void and through the ecstasy and through the joy, walking through life together and enacting this beautiful new story, this planetary awakening together. It's a blessing, it's a joy to be here together, to feel each other, to know each other, to love each other outrageously. So wherever you are in this journey, just come closer. And if you have any questions how to do that, what is the best place for you, I'm here. I would love to be in touch with you and get to know you and hear your story and find our way to the inside together. So thank you so much.